This whiskey sells for 200 US dollars, but is it worth that much? Well, we're going to find out today. I'm Jeff. This is Whiskey. Stick around. So, alternative today, we're looking at Johnnie Walker Blue Label, loved by casual whiskey drinkers and corporate gift givers, widely criticized by whiskey snobs. This is a whiskey that always gets a reaction out of people. But is it any good? Before we answer that, a few things. This is a blended Scotch whiskey, meaning that we have malt whiskey in here, which is made from malted barley, but that is then mixed with grain whiskey, which might be corn, it might be wheat, or even unmalted barley. All the whiskey components come from distilleries owned by Diageo. Diageo is the mega corporation that owns Johnnie Walker. They also own a bunch of other stuff. We're talking Smirnoff, Tanqueray, Guinness. They do a little bit of everything. Our Johnnie Walker Blue here is no age stated. They don't give us an age number, which is kind of unusual for a whiskey this premium. Usually more premium whiskeys are going to give us an age statement. Scotch law requires that the youngest whiskey in a blend set the age stated on the label, but some brands might want to use some younger components but still make the whiskey seem premium. They want to keep that flexibility, so they just won't tell you the age at all. That said, Johnnie Walker Blue is known to be made of mostly older whiskeys. A lot of them are rumored to be 25 years old or older still, but of course we have no way of confirming that because the brand doesn't share that with us. And also, importantly, when it comes to whiskey, age is not everything. Still, many of us enthusiasts criticize Johnnie Walker Blue not just for being a very expensive no age stated whiskey, which we see as a lack of transparency, but this is also bottled at 40%. Now, 40% is the bare legal minimum ABV for Scotch, and for a lot of people, that means our whiskey is going to come off very light, very smooth, very gentle. But oppositely, for a lot of other people out there, myself included, that means our whiskey is very likely to be light in texture and light in flavor. And that's because alcohol does help carry flavor. A lot of whiskey enthusiasts out there only look for whiskeys that are 46% ABV or higher still, because they're looking for that extra bit of intensity. And finally, this whiskey is chill filtered, another big no-no for enthusiasts. That's when they strip out fatty acid esters and proteins that can cause some clouding in your whiskey after it's poured. And the thing is, most consumers understandably do get concerned. If they pour a dram of whiskey, it looks clear after the pour, and then it starts fogging up. They might think their whiskey has gone off somehow. It hasn't. Unfortunately, a lot of the compounds that cause that fogging, or Scotch mist as we call it, also carry flavor. Basically, casual consumers who might not know any better want that clarity, while the enthusiasts hate the loss of character. And finally, and I know I said finally earlier, but this is the finally, this has added coloring in it, which means a caramel colorant was added to the whiskey just for aesthetic purposes. And the reason they do that is because they want consistency between batches when it comes to just the look of the whiskey itself in the glass, because even a mass-produced whiskey like Johnnie Walker is still a batch product. All whiskey is a batch product. So if you have one batch that's a little bit lighter, one's a little bit darker, that's not consistent. The brand wants consistency, so they add color. So all of this makes Blue a very contentious bottle in the whiskey world, but you know what? Not every whiskey needs to be made for us snotty, picky enthusiasts. A smooth, consistent, mass-appealing whiskey can still work as long as they nail the flavor, which of course is what matters most. Now, marketing-wise, supposedly only 1 out of every 10,000 casks is good enough to make it into Johnnie Walker Blue, which sounds like a very long day at work for the master blender. So they really want to play up the exclusivity and the premiumness of this bottle. Anyway, I think that's all the background stuff pretty much out of the way, so let's finally get into nosing and tasting this stuff. In the meantime, if you'll kindly leave a like down below, that'd be greatly appreciated. So on the nose, this is not a very expressive whiskey. I do get some toffee, some honey, some caramel, some spices. There are some florals in here. There's some vanilla. There's a touch of plum in this, as well as some oak. It's all kind of muted though. On our palate and finish, this is still a very light whiskey. It's light in texture, but it does become more interesting than it was on the nose. We start off with some toffee and some wisps of smoke. Then we move on to some caramel and honey notes in here. The caramel is a little bit artificial leaning. Think artificial sweetener in that direction. We also get some spices and some indistinct fruits. This gives us a short finish on tropical fruit, some cola, some earthiness, as well as some salty coastal maritime type notes. All right, so here's the thing. Coming from the perspective of a whiskey snob, a whiskey enthusiast, I do have some notes. However, it is important to remember that this whiskey is not made for me. I am not the demographic. Is that because I'm better than other people? Yes. But seriously, I'm not the target audience for this, and it's all just opinion, so do keep that in mind in my review. Listen, is this stuff smooth? Yes. Does it taste old? Yeah, I do believe most of the whiskey in here is of a certain age. And most importantly, does this taste good? Yes, it's pleasant. I think a lot of enthusiasts almost feel obliged to hate this whiskey just because of what it represents, what it stands for. It really is the opposite of an enthusiast whiskey, but does it taste good? Sure. I mean, if I wanted a whiskey and someone offered me this, I wouldn't turn it down. And this bottle will get finished. Eventually. But in my mind, this is not a fine whiskey. A lot of single malts and a lot of well-composed blends offer up a lot more character, depth, and complexity than this one does here. Johnnie Walker Blue is more concerned with being accessible to everyone, even if it's impressive to no one. And interestingly, this was a really difficult whiskey to make tasting notes on. And that's just because all the flavors here seem kind of muddled together. When I prep for a review, I'll sit down with the whiskey, I'll try and make some tasting notes, which are basically, I mean, they're all bullshit, but they're just loose flavor associations. And listen, before I got into whiskey, I also thought it was pretentious nonsense.
An opulent overture of rain-kissed heather segues into an ethereal serenade of petrichor and angelica.
Also, there's vanilla. There's always vanilla. So yeah, tasting notes might sound a little bit silly, but they are the best tools that we have to describe the flavors that we get in a whiskey. And the issue with the flavors in this whiskey is that they're not well defined. They all kind of bleed together. I do think a part of the problem here is the ABV. I think if we had a higher ABV, our flavors might have definition, but as it stands, they're blurry. So overall, I would say that this whiskey is pleasant, but somewhat nondescript. It's mature, but it's not complex. It's generic by design, which makes it a very difficult whiskey to recommend, especially at this price point. This is over $200 in some stores. And for that, at that price point, I mean, the competition is fierce. In a recent video I did, I recommended the Glenmorangie Signet over this one. Here in my market, the price point is somewhat similar, but in a lot of other markets, as it turns out, it is more expensive. But still, if you want to go in the premium direction and you're not too concerned about price, that is a much better option. But if we want to go down in price, and I'm sure we do, let's stick with Glenmorangie, because Glenmorangie as a single malt is almost as widely available as Johnnie Walker in most markets. So let's recommend the Glenmorangie 18 here. This is going to be cheaper than the Johnnie Blue and still substantially better. And hell, we could just stay within the Johnnie Walker range. Let's look at the green. The green label is a solid whiskey. This one is a blended malt. It actually gives us an age statement of 15 years, and it sells for a fraction of the price. There's also Johnnie Walker Black Label, which is 12 years old. The whiskey is not great, but it is not bad, and it's far better value. So for flavor, we have better options. For value, we have better options. I think the reason this sells as well as it does is just the prestige of it. Because let's face it, Johnnie Walker did nail the branding on this one. I think it looks really good. We have the royal blue bottle with gold accents. We have this very fancy looking posh box. I wasn't planning on reviewing the aesthetics of the bottle. I often do in my reviews, but not for this one. But if I were, I would give it 5 out of 5. It looks great. Also, the whole thing about only 1 in 10,000 casks being good enough for this, it sounds very prestigious. So everything about this screams elegance and luxury. Except for the whiskey in the bottle. The liquid does not match the price. As it is with so many other luxury products, a lot of this is just presentation and marketing. I mean, so many people who don't even drink whiskey know about Johnnie Walker Blue, and that is impressive. Good for them, but not good for you, because as a consumer, you have far better options for the price. Now for scores, I scored these alternatives out of 10, and this is based on taste and not value. So based on taste alone, I would give this bottle a 5 out of 10. It is average, it is pleasant, it is sippable, but it is unimpressive. If I were to factor value into that score, it would be worse. So if the message isn't clear yet, don't buy this. It is generic assembly line whiskey with a great deal of presentation and marketing power behind it, but you can do better, and you should, even if you're a corporate gift giver. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to bring us to the end of my little review on Johnnie Walker Blue. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope nobody's too butthurt if you're in love with this bottle. Great, this is all just one man's opinion. If you want to help out with the channel, I'll put Patreon and PayPal linked down below. This channel is all me, from scripting, obviously shooting, and editing. It's a one-man show. Every little contribution helps, so thank you in advance. Patrons are over here, and I guess I will catch you in the next video. We'll see you next time. Bye, guys.